Richie and John, making a splash. Voices from the corner, stories untold. We gather the truth, let the truth unfold. It's Newsday, Tuesday, hear the call. Every story matters, let them all stand tall. On Newsday, Tuesday, we stand together, uniting the voices. In any weather, with facts in hand, we push for peace. In a world of love, may the judgment cease.
The Mutual Broadcasting System presents Richie and John, the podcast that connects you with the people, events, headlines, and lifestyle interests of the global LGBTQ+ community.
Through the airwaves, we break the silence. LGBTQ lives, we promote the resilience. From the streets to the stage, we amplify every struggle and triumph, we won't let die. It's Newsday, Tuesday, hear the call, ever call.
Here's Richie Roy and John McMullen.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Richie and John. It is Newsday Tuesday, and we have a ton of news for you. This week, I'm here with my co-host, John McMullen. John, how are you?
Greetings, sir. I'm great. Thank you for the introduction, and happy to say, well, I'm sure this is not going to make our audience as happy as it does us, but because we have a big event coming up this coming weekend when a bunch of our listeners for Richie and John are going to be converging on Palm Springs during our Pride Festival, we're actually going to take a week of hiatus this next week. So we will not have a Newsday Tuesday next week, but we will return the following week. And what a joy that will be, because the week that we take off, that Tuesday, is going to be Election Day. And so that'll give us a chance to kind of recover, figure out who's suing who, and how long we're going to have to wait to find out who actually won the elections, and all that kind of good stuff. So whatever the case, we'll be back with you on the following Tuesday, the 12th of November, and be here to talk all about all the exciting stuff that happened in what is going to probably turn out to be perhaps one of the most contentious elections in the history of the United States of America.
Yeah, it's a crazy time. And, you know, to that point, we've seen this week some extreme cowardice happening, and it's actually been really alarming and dispiriting. But the LA Times and the Washington Post both had something happen which is pretty dire. So each of them, their editorial boards were prepared to endorse Kamala Harris, and the owners of the LA Times and of the Washington Post, the latter being owned by Jeff Bezos of Amazon,
the richest man in the world,
spiked the endorsements, said, no, you can't publish them.
And so, you know what I did?
What did you do?
I did what 200,000 other people I read yesterday did, and that is I spiked my subscription to the Washington Post. And while I was at it, I decided, because I was just waiting for them to do this as well, and I've been very discouraged by the way things have changed over the past several months there, I also spiked my subscription to the New York Times.
Yeah. I actually am bummed out because about a month ago, I canceled my Washington Post subscription because of their terrible attempts at journalism. I wish I had held on a little longer because I wish I could have joined this wave and just sent that message even stronger. But yeah, Washington Post and LA Times, shame on your owners. I feel bad for the journalists because their bottom line, you know, it hurts them because their companies now, because of craven owners who are scared and cowering of a potential Trump presidency where they might be subjects of retribution, are squelching the press that they own. It's really sad and embarrassing for them. You know, Washington Post, 200,000 that's nothing to sneeze at. That's actually a big chunk of subscribers to go away.
Let me tell you what Wall Street would do to a media company that is publicly traded, that lost or had a churn of 200,000 subscribers to their service, whether it was a Sirius XM satellite radio or HBO or any of those. They would have a meltdown, and you would see it in their stock price that day. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny. I got an email yesterday from Washington Post saying, hey, would you like to come back? $29 for a whole year of the Washington Post. And I thought, wow, well, yeah, no, we're going to skip that.
It gives you an opportunity, though, to respond and say, yeah, you can thank Mr. Bezos. I will not be back. I want to point out in our talking about this, though, that it's a tough decision to make when you know that the people who are part of the journalism team at these organizations were not happy about this.
Right.
Because you want to be able to support them and support the work that they do, because they're going to continue to do their best from the inside to make sure that people know what the hell is going on. And in fact, the Washington Post did publish several pieces by their various writers that were very critical of Jeff Bezos and the organization, and talking about the history of the Washington Post in terms of the role that they have played and the previous times that they have also chosen to not make a endorsement. And I thought that that was fairly interesting, and I'm glad that they were at least able to publish those pieces. However, I felt that the strongest, the loudest message you can send is to send the one from your pocketbook. And I do feel bad. There are a number of very good journalists, editors, executives who actually resigned from the company. Actually, not just at the Washington Post, but at the Los Angeles Times as well, because their publishers made these decisions that were very yellow-bellied.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a moment where everyone kind of has to, protect what we have left of our press. The people who work there have to be brave and make really tough decisions. And, subscribers and people have to make their decisions too. I would say, to the extent you can't, if you are a subscriber to the Washington Post and you're thinking about it, and you're disgusted, make a noisy exit. That's the thing. Because we've talked about boycotts before, and boycotts matter, and boycotts only when you're noisy about it, only when they know that your money isn't going there anymore. So make a noisy exit from the Washington Post. Make a noisy exit from Amazon.
Make sure, by the way, anywhere that you have a social media footprint, that you go in and make a post about this, and make sure that you hashtag and or connect their name with their link. If it's Twitter, it's, at WAPO or whatever, that it's in your posting, because those things, that actually shows up on their desk and it fries their fanny.
Yeah. So, make a noisy exit. I would say, after the aftermath of this, I'm going to studiously, and I'm trying to figure out how to make it noisy. But, to the extent I can avoid Amazon, I'm going to take my money elsewhere. I might go ahead and just drop Prime. I've had Prime since Prime first came out, but I want, and I will make a message. I will, send an email, or if, there's a little comment box as to why you're quitting. I'll say because Jeff Bezos silenced the Washington Post.
Yep.
And hopefully enough messages get to Jeff Bezos that he'll feel something. He won't feel much, because billionaires are really insulated from any kind of effects. That's the kind of horrible thing about this reality, is that people like Elon Musk and like Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg or whatever, don't feel any consequences for anything they do.
Well, that's why I've always been a fan of buying a wood chipper. And, well, I'm not going to finish that statement because I know it's going to make you pale.
But, so that was kind of the media news of the day. But we have plenty of LGBTQ news to talk to you about. And I think the first one goes directly to the current campaign and some surrogates saying some things that are a little bit gross.
You remember Kenneth Copeland, the well-known televangelist and former advisor to Donald Trump? Well, he has made headlines again recently with a prayer against homosexuality during a rescue tour, a Rescue America tour to be exact, which was broadcast by Flashpoint Live. Copeland, who's aged 87, up there, he's actually that makes him senior to Joe Biden. He prayed to, quote, break the power of the homosexual lesbian spirits trying to ruin our children and this nation, end quote. Well, his prayer requested divine oversight in selecting school board members, judges, and other leaders. And Copeland stated, quote, "Those that refuse to hold to your will, remove them," end quote. He also condemned abortion and so-called perversions. I like perversions. Despite being twice divorced, Copeland, who famously defied COVID-19 restrictions for in-person worship, conducted controversial healing broadcasts where he claimed that he could cure COVID-19. The multimillionaire televangelist he has been criticized in the past for his opulent lifestyle, including a lavish mansion and a private jet funded by his congregation. And in 2021, he faced allegations of sexual abuse by former adult film actor Madison Marquette. Wow. He sounds a lot like former president of the United States.
No wonder that he is a Trump acolyte.
Yeah. Well, you know, the shitholes that play together stay together.
Right, exactly. You know, when I hear about things like this, it reminds me all over again that just tax churches. Let's just tax churches. The idea that because you're some charlatan that claims to have a direct, red phone to God, that
right.
You can just have private jets and mansions and everything is tax free.
Yeah. Hello, Almighty.
Right. And you can just bilk your credulous listeners for millions and millions of dollars without any kind of, if nothing else, if we're going to have this kind of like Barnum and Bailey religion in this country, we might as well tax it and get some benefit out of it.
Maybe he's got a red flashing telephone that beeps when he gets a ring from the God cave.
Yeah.
Kind of like the bat phone.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he's Commissioner Gordon, he's right. Just waiting.
Right.
But it just, the fact that, and I saw, because it just brings up to this tax-free status for churches is just crazy, because it's supposed to be that in exchange for your tax-free status, you're not supposed to weigh in on political things. That's like the trade-off, right?
Right.
Because you're supposed to be a house of worship for religion. Except I saw a video the other day of a church that literally had a creche that had a Trump, Vance, MAGA flag on the creche, and it had a little baby in the creche, and then another little toddler steering a little steering wheel, and they were pushing it down the aisle of a church before a service. I don't know what it was supposed to signify, except just MAGA-ness, but that's something that is happening in a tax-free, quote, church on a Sunday.
I better never walk into a church and see at Christmas time a little baby Jesus wrapped in swaddling Trump flags.
Right.
Come on.
It's ludicrous.
It would make Jesus Christ's skin crawl.
I mean, the whole, all of this. I mean, the way in which evangelical leaders try to make the case for Trump, I mean, who is like the most literally tainted with sin person who has ever existed, is very funny to see.
Absolutely. Well, before I throw up, let's move on. Video has gone viral featuring transgender man Shane Ivan Nash confronting right-wing commentator and one of our favorites. I still remember meeting him for the first time when he was about, 16 years old, Ben Shapiro, during a debate that was hosted by Jubilee. The exchange begins with Nash asking questions on men's ability to get pregnant, sexual assault experience, and the benefits of white supremacy. The benefits of it. Nash then challenges Shapiro's stance on transgender issues, saying, quote, "I'm a transgender man. I've experienced sexual assault and abortion rights affect me directly," end quote. As Shapiro responds, Nash accuses him of being obsessed with genitalia, leading to laughter in the room. Shapiro, caught off guard, misgenders Nash and struggles with Nash's questioning about forced parenthood following assault. Nash criticizes Shapiro's fast-talking debate tactics, stating, quote, "You jump from one subject to the next. How does it feel to have it in your face, end quote. The tension peaks as Nash accuses Shapiro of prioritizing harmful discourse over critical issues like the economy. The debate ends with Nash calling Shapiro a, quote, dick, end quote, before walking away. How precious.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
I watched the video with Nash and I'm of two minds about this. Nash is very well spoken and, really makes a good case. And I've seen a number of these videos, these kind of like round robins where people go up and challenge Ben Shapiro. And there's like a chess timer kind of thing. Like you have like a minute to challenge Ben or something. And I don't know. I think it's at the end of the day, I think that no one necessarily wins this because people, it reinforces what people want to see, because I think people who disagree with Shapiro will see a mic drop moment. People who like Shapiro will see someone who is willing to engage with the other side and score some points. Because at the end of the day, it's Shapiro's show. Shapiro's doing this. And I think and so I think that it's cool that these are going viral and that people are like, making some points, sticking it to him. But he's the one pulling the levers. And at the end of the day, it's about amplifying him. It's about platforming him. And I'm not a big fan of that. Like, I actually wish people wouldn't go on Ben Shapiro's fucking round robin. I wish that it would be empty, because at the end of the day, it gives him sparring partners.
Right.
And he is a mendacious little prick. And, at the end of the day, he will get his side, people who agree with him will think that he has won the battle. And so I don't think anyone wins if you're debating with this little pipsqueak, frankly.
It might be the best course of dealing with this is that if you get an invitation from any media idiot on the conservative right with the first name Ben, who is Jewish, because we could say the same thing about that other moron, Ben Stein, I would say just turn the invitation down. If they can't get anybody to spar with them, they're not going to succeed with what they're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if like a conservative firebrand falls in the forest and doesn't make a sound. It's like they need oxygen. And this is he's just getting infinite oxygen from these sparring matches that people are doing with him. So I say don't do it. Like, just stay away from him.
Have you been paying attention, by the way, to that aggressive LGBTQ agenda for kids that Wisconsin Senator Tammy Baldwin, who is facing re-election, is getting attacked by the Republicans over the allegations that she supports those aggressive agendas for children?
Aggressive LGBTQ agenda for children.
Yeah.
I've missed that. I missed that part.
Well, one ad from the Senate Leadership Fund falsely claims, and it's the so-called Senate Leadership Fund, falsely claims that Baldwin advocates for minors' access to puberty blockers and sex change surgeries. LGBTQ Nation investigated, tracing the claim to Baldwin's October 5th, 2023 post supporting Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers' veto against anti-trans bills. Baldwin wrote, quote, "Trans kids deserve to feel safe and welcome." Neither the post nor Evers' video mentioned specific medical procedures for minors. Ads also allege that Baldwin funded $400,000 to a Madison nonprofit, Briar Patch Youth Services, suggesting that it promotes an LGBTQ agenda. However, Briar Patch's support group, Teens Like Us, only offers weekly meetings for LGBTQ plus youth. Jill Pfeiffer, executive director of Briar Patch, stated, quote, "Reputable outlets have verified claims about our agency are false. Allocated funds aim to develop non-clinical counseling for homeless youth, in fact. LGBTQ Nation rates both claims as false."
So, the thing is to jump from trans kids deserve to feel safe and welcome to advocating for anything is, first of all, just malpractice and just lies. Second of all, advocating for access to puberty blockers, that is generally widely considered to be a therapy for trans youth that is accepted as being useful while youth are determining whether or not they want, the transitioning makes sense for them. And as for the minors' sex change surgeries, this is a canard. This just doesn't happen. It's not real.
Right.
And so let's just dismiss that out of hand. But, the idea of advocating for puberty blockers, why not? If doctors, again, this is something we talk about on the show a lot. If a doctor and the patient, if a doctor and a child or a minor and their parents are, have in agreement as to what makes sense for this child, why wouldn't you advocate for that? Again, it's medical. It's like medical experts making scientific decisions. That there should not be that shouldn't be controversial to me.
Me either.
It's kind of like if someone has asthma and the doctor wants to prescribe, an inhaler, for them to have a no inhalants law. So what is the doctor supposed to do? They know that the treatment for asthma is an inhaler. What are they supposed to do? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. When all of the medical literature suggests that puberty blockers make perfect sense when someone who is a minor is considering transitioning. And all of these anti-trans laws, preventing gender affirming care. And this is kind of even one step removed from that. This is just literally an attack ad saying that Tammy Baldwin supports access to puberty blockers, which isn't even true. It's like 7 steps of stupidity. I can't with this. And this thing about Briar Patch Youth Services, again, the thing is there's this on the right, there's this impunity where you just say lies and you just make things up constantly with an idea that a lot of people will hear what you say and will never hear the fact check. They'll never find out that you were lying. They will never hear the truth. And so people like a Marjorie Taylor Greene or a Lauren Boebert or whatever this group is, Senate Leadership Fund, can just lie with impunity. And that will work for them. It literally works for them with a certain tranche of the population who will never hear the truth about this.
I have an idea for a new podcast that you and I could do on the side. We should call it Pants on Fire. And what we should do is we should have 3 or 4 examples of these big, bold, brash lies that get told each week and have our listeners vote on who is the biggest liar.
Yeah.
Kind of do it like The Biggest Loser, but the biggest liar.
Yeah.
And maybe just so that it's fair and everybody gets in on the action, we prohibit any of Donald Trump's statements from being on the show.
That's a great rule. I mean, and that's a funny idea, but in all honesty, the breadth and scope of constant lying about everything that the Republican Party and the right is doing is also just exhausting because you can't fact check every single word that comes out of these blowhards' mouths.
It just gets so tiring and you get to a point where you're like, I'm pretty sure that I have a good sense of bullshit, but this is why actually I wonder if the show that was done by Penn and Teller on Showtime for years could still be done today, because we live in a world where there is nothing but bullshit, it seems, most of the time. And it's just incredulous to me that we, as a society, put up with this because it seems to be okay, because tens of millions of people think it's okay. It's not okay.
It's not okay. And the thing is, what I'm glad about, though, is the work. It is not the job of Kamala Harris or Tim Walz to do the work of debunking the bullshit coming from the other side, because then you can never tell your own story. That's part of the trick here, is that when you flood every market, every platform, every media with absolute lies and garbage 24/7, it makes it impossible for you to make an affirmative case for yourself if you're on the defensive. If you're trying to say, wait, but actually you can't do it. Like, and I think that what Harris and Waltz have gotten right is they're just making the affirmative case for why they make sense, why their economic plans make sense, why their social plans make sense, why they are representative of this country as it is, not as it used to be 100 years ago. And I'm glad that they're not getting bogged down, because there's no way you could have a newspaper that literally all it does is debunk right-wing talking points and statements, and you could print it would be a doorstop every day, and you could never tell a story other than that story. But that's not a story that we need to be telling at this moment. And so but so these falsehoods, I'm glad the LGBTQ nation is doing the work of finding these stories and rating them false. But I'm also glad that Harris Waltz is not getting bogged down doing that work.
Yeah, me too. Hey, Richie, staying on the transgender topics and also staying kind of in your wheelhouse as somebody who is a legal professional, jump in, and it's also a story from your own neck of the woods. Talk about this situation with the transgender woman abused in jail and the landmark lawsuit that she has settled.
Yeah. So in New York, a transgender woman named Deanna Latreille faced really horrible abuse during her 2017 arrest. She called police for a domestic issue, and when they arrived, the police misgendered her, verbally abused her, and detained her. The cops were in Watertown, New York, and they stated, quote, "We can't let you walk the streets looking like a woman." At the Jefferson County Jail, officers removed her wig, conducted invasive searches, and placed her with male inmates. This is not uncommon, by the way, in jails in New York, and I'm sure elsewhere, is that that trans women are often placed in male facilities, much
detention
to their danger.
Centers,
male detention centers, much to their danger and peril. So facing trauma, Deanna Latreille said, "When I was in the jail cell after the assault, I wanted to die." Through a lawsuit with the NYCLU, which is the New York City, or the New York sort of flavor of the ACLU, Latreille achieved a pivotal settlement mandating police and correctional reforms. The reforms dictate proper treatment for trans folks and enforces respectful searches and bookings, correct use of names and pronouns. And Latreille hopes that these settlements will put other counties and police departments on notice. So in addition, State Senator Julia Salazar pushes for statewide prison policy reforms, continuing the fight against trans discrimination. This has been a problem for a long time. Just seeing in 2020, this is 2017 arrest. This continues to this day. There's a reason why we need to make serious reforms, for prisons and jails, because they oftentimes will put trans women in the male population, trans men in the female population. They just don't give a shit about the fact that trans people exist and need to be treated with respect and dignity. And they don't care, seemingly, these corrections officers and police officers, that they're putting people in mortal peril. I mean, a trans woman, additionally, to add, at times, people who are trans find it extremely difficult to get their hormone treatment while they are incarcerated as well, which causes gender dysphoria and a lot of other sort of negative impacts. So it's a big deal. And so, I'm glad that this settlement is maybe going to make some changes, at least in New York State, as to how jails and prisons deal with trans populations. But this is an uphill battle because, not to be kind of like put too fine a point on it, but a lot of corrections officers and police officers tend to be people who might be kind of MAGA people and don't really give a shit about the existence of trans people.
What might be kind of interesting to do as an extension of this topic would be for us to invite to our program somebody who is the significant other of a past guest of ours, you might recall that we had a program with transgender activist Laura Meeks, and she had been in the military. She was a United States Air Force major bomber pilot, and she transitioned some years ago. And her spouse, her wife, is actually a mental health professional who works in a California state penitentiary. And
Oh, wow.
maybe we should have a conversation about that with her, because I'm sure that she would have a thing or three to say about these kinds of situations across America.
Absolutely. That would be
Yeah.
a great guest to have for sure.
Well, there is more news. We're going a little beyond our 5 stories this week because of the fact that we will not be here next week. But colleges and states with anti-lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer plus youth, or not just youths, but people, colleges and states with anti-LGBTQ plus laws are losing students, with many opting for institutions in less restrictive areas. A report from The Hill highlights this trend. Catherine Meyer from the Brookings Institution said, quote, students are increasingly mindful of political climates when choosing colleges. A recent poll reveals 28% of students ruled out colleges for political reasons, including 75% of liberals avoiding states with restrictive LGBTQ plus policies. Economics professor Richard Starks from UC Santa Barbara noted, quote, colleges find it hard to assure students of inclusivity where state laws impose restrictions. Kevin McClure from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, elaborated, quote, institutions face challenges enforcing state policies impacting college students. Many states like Texas and Florida limit diversity initiatives. Heidi Sue from the American Council on Education emphasized, quote, we need to convey higher education's role beyond political issues. These states' restrictions continue to shape students' educational choices nationwide, as they should.
It's kind of a bummer because this is not a no-win situation, but it is a real problem because we've talked before about whether you stay and fight or leave. And what this is a brain drain. This is brain drain from states like Florida, like Texas, like an Alabama or a Tennessee.
Sadly, I think most of the brains in those states have been drained already by their governors and their legislatures.
But the young people who live in those states who are optimistic and want a better world.
I get it. I agree with you.
They see the horizons in their own states and they say, hell no, I'm not going to stay here. I'm going to go somewhere. I'm going to go to a state like a Massachusetts or a Oregon or a California or many other states where people are treated with dignity and respect, and where, if nothing else too, where education is valued. Because, what we've seen, this is the perfect example of this is Florida, where Governor DeSantis has essentially weaponized public education against education itself, trying to turn, what is it called, New College or whatever, into some kind of, Harvard for the hard right bullshit. Yeah. And you see faculty is miserable. Students are leaving in droves. And the thing is, at the end of the day, if what they do leads to schools closing in those states, they win anyway, because they don't even like higher education.
Right.
They don't believe in it.
Yeah.
So
they don't want you to be educated.
They don't want you to be educated.
That makes you into the enemy.
Right.
To know things.
And so what you end up with is a brain drain, and, eventually states that are ill-educated don't have higher, education institutions that are of any worth. And it leads to the further kind of bifurcation of the country into the states that are representative of America in 2024 and the states that want to be representative of America in 1874. And it's a bummer because there are faculty members, who live in these states and work at these colleges who don't buy this, don't buy what's being peddled, but they're being sort of squeezed. Students are like, get me the fuck out of here. I'm going to go somewhere else. So it's just it's a terrible situation for higher education because, I think in a perfect world, every state, and again, partially because of economics, every state should have an excellent public higher education system where you can go for little or no money. If you're a good student in a state, you should be able to get a great education for free or almost nothing. But that's increasingly not happening. And in states where they're basically killing higher ed on the vine, you're definitely not going to have that.
No. Well, our next story this week takes us to my native homeland. And I read this and I was just absolutely incensed, Richie. But up in Bremerton, Washington, which is just across the Puget Sound from Seattle, Joseph Sweeney, a 38-year-old, is now in police custody after allegedly placing a noose around his son's teenage friend, reportedly because the boy identified as gay. According to the King County Prosecutor's Office, King County is where Seattle is, Sweeney overheard the 14-year-old admit that he was gay during a conversation. He then allegedly tightened a noose around the boy's neck, as reported by Kitsap County. Their sheriff's deputies there said that the boy managed to escape and reported the incident to his mom, who contacted the police. Sweeney was arrested and charged with a hate crime and 2 counts of second-degree assault. Sheriff's deputies said that the boys fled the property, and court documents revealed that Sweeney also recorded the boys attempting to humiliate them. He was attempting to humiliate them. During a trailer search, an unregistered firearm was also found. Sweeney denied the allegations. He remains in custody on $1,000 bail, and he's scheduled for a court appearance on November the 13th. The boy's stepfather defended him, claiming that the situation was exaggerated. Unbelievable. What is with people? I mean, that you would even think of putting a noose around a child's neck because they said that they were gay. What level of illness is coursing through the veins of this monster?
Mm-hmm. It's unfathomable. I mean, it's just it's just
lock him up and throw away the key. I'm done with these people. I'm just totally done with these motherfuckers.
Yeah, there's nothing. What makes me bummed out?
I mean, it wasn't even his child. I mean, it would be worse if it was, but the fact that you would do that to somebody else's kid and think that you're going to get away with that,
right?
Good God.
No, and the thing is, this
sick heterosexual bastards. Sick.
And the thing is, this guy is 38. I mean, this is someone who, 38. I'm trying to think, is that Gen X? I mean, this is someone who, there's no age in which this is appropriate behavior, to be clear. But this is someone who is younger than I am. Someone who is a fair number of years younger than I am thinks that it's okay to place a noose around his son's teenage friend because he identified as gay. Like, what world is this person living? I don't know what Bremerton, Washington is like, but
it is the home of one of the largest naval shipyards and Navy bases on the West Coast.
Is it I don't know. Is it a backwater? I mean, like, what is?
Not really. A lot of people live in Bremerton and take the ferry across into downtown Seattle and work. I mean, it is considered, a suburb of Seattle, although it's like an hour by boat.
So, like, what's this guy's deal? I mean, like, it's just, I don't get it. It's unfathomable. Doesn't make sense to me.
It's a fucking R word.
It's a good reminder that even in 2024, there are people, there's no excuse for this. And I'm glad that these stories are reported because it's a reminder that in 2024, there are still idiots out there who would, essentially, Matthew Shepard someone, some teenage kid who's a friend of this guy's son. That is just worth knowing. It's worth a reminder that these people exist that literally would kill and even if not attempting to kill, to very dangerously threaten the life of someone just because they are a gay teen.
Yeah, it's unconscionable, and it is something that to me is unforgivable, and I hope that they continue to work to throw the book at him. It's a story that we will continue to follow as it makes its way through the justice system up in the Pacific Northwest. We're going to conclude this news roundup this week with a story that has to do with queer intersex youth facing heightened risks, according to a new study. And for those, because we really have not spent any time talking about intersex, you want to describe what intersex is, Richie?
Yeah, so intersex, there are a lot of folks who are intersex, and that is, there's a whole range of sort of chromosomal types outside of XX and XY. There's XXY, there's Klinefelters, there's all these different sort of flavors of intersex where medically you're not, just straight up XX or XY, this sort of male or female chromosomal markers.
And some people may be familiar with the term that gets or has been used many times in the past of hermaphrodite, and that would fall into the intersex category.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of an older word for a type of intersex. But a new study by the Trevor Project has revealed that 33% of LGBTQ plus intersex youth have experienced or been threatened with conversion therapy, compared to 12% of non-intersex LGBTQ peers. Findings from the 2024 U.S. National Survey on Mental Health of LGBTQ plus young people highlights an alarming trend that 43% of intersex youth have been subjected to conversion therapy and reported suicide attempts in the past year, compared to 22% among those who were not subjected to it. The study notes that conversion therapy threatened significantly increased suicide risk. Trevor Project states, quote, rates of attempting suicide were higher among intersex LGBTQ plus young people who had undergone surgery to fit normative expectations. Such surgeries, non-consensual or otherwise, lead to a 34% suicide attempt rate among affected intersex youth. Additionally, 73% of intersex youth experience anxiety issues, often due to pressures to change their identity. The report draws attention to systemic challenges intersex youth face, emphasizing a need for supportive interventions. This is something that is a big issue. A lot of times intersex face a lot of challenges from a very young age because, sometimes different sort of intersex sort of chromosomal differences result in things like sort of genitalia that doesn't necessarily easily correspond to, male or female genitalia. And there are many stories especially from the past and into the present, of parents, quote, assigning a gender to an intersex youth when they're a baby or when they're young. And it doesn't, there are stories are legion that it doesn't always take, and many times it doesn't. There's someone who's born intersex, the parents decide, this is a boy, and raise the intersex youth as a boy, and the intersex youth grows up and is like, not for me, sorry. This isn't how I feel. This isn't who I am. And so, the story highlights, first of all, importantly, the existence of intersex youth and intersex adults, which is something that, I'm glad is part of the LGBTQ umbrella. There are some folks who are LGB without the T, and I think that part of that would include without the I as well.
Mm-hmm.
But intersex is a real thing and sort of manifests in a lot of different ways. But, this story highlights that youth who are intersex are really up against sort of huge challenges.
Yeah, and I would also say that when they're talking about the idea of putting anybody through quote unquote conversion therapy, which just makes my skin crawl, and having seen so many documentaries about what happens with people who are subjected to going into that and how many of them are faced with oftentimes life-threatening situations, sometimes at their own hands. Mm-hmm. If Congress and the Supreme Court can technically outlaw abortion, I think that we should be working on the left to outlaw conversion therapy.
And it's been in the crosshairs for a while. I mean, a lot of states have state bans on conversion therapy, but
I mean, on a federal level,
yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, of course, yeah. I think that would be a great just piece of the agenda should we be so lucky as to have a Harris-Walz administration with the Senate and the House. I mean, if that is the case, if we get that, and I'm so hopeful that we do, day one, I want omnibus bill after omnibus bill to jam through a lot. I want them to get rid of the filibuster day one.
That's got to be number one.
I want them to fucking pack the Supreme Court, and I want them to jam through as much legislation as they can and just stick it to the right, who has
the MAGA,
who have just either put bad laws in place for years or just thrown monkey wrenches into the works whenever Democrats are in power to keep anything good from happening.
Absolutely.
Use this time wisely. And I hope that, the Harris-Walz administrations, that Harris and Walz, and I think they have got the message because they've talked about getting rid of the filibuster. Understand that the rule book has changed. You can't get in there and your first 100 days just sit there with sort of tilling around with your thumb up your ass. You have to, because you only have 2 years before the next House election. You have essentially like a year and a half to do all the things for your first 4 years, because then there's dealing with the House, the midterm House elections, and then there's all kinds of whatever delays and campaigning and whatever. So that first year and a half, they need to be fucking on it.
Yeah, no diddling around for a while, and seeing, taking the temperature or watching for which wind direction things are going in America. We already know the wind direction. We've been facing that for a long time, and besides the fact their patterns are changing. So it's just time to really nail these situations down and get some action done so that the American people, the American majority, the real majority, can feel like if they support the things that they believe in, they can actually get work done that's going to make this country a better, easier place to live in.
Because at the end of the day, one of the things I don't want to see happen is if we have a Harris-Walz administration, and I don't think they'll do this because I think they're smarter than this, but the idea that we should do anything to, quote, heal the wounds and bridge the gap. Because at the end of the day, Harris-Walz is a deeply centrist ticket. For all the Republicans say about it being like some left-wing commie, whatever ticket, this is a down the middle center left to just plain old centrist ticket. They have the mandate there are huge chunks of this country that are going to vote who previously were, voted for Republicans. Because this is and you have tons of former Republican, administration figures from different past administrations who are supporting Harris, because this is a centrist ticket. And so we don't have to bother with healing America. Just get the shit done right away.
Amen to that, brother. Wow. We are going to have such an incredible show when we return on the 12th of November, a week out of the election. And by then, hopefully, we know who the president of the United States is going to be come January the 20th of 2025. And hopefully we know who's going to be in power in the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives, and how many governors in the country are going to be on the correct side of the equation, and a lot of other situations too. We'll know about various referendums that happen in various states around the country. It's going to be quite a show, I think, when we come back together with you. It's a very well-timed moment in our lives for us to have this 1 week break. And when we come back, we'll be able to start addressing a lot of these things. And the areas that we need to be concerned about, we'll start to bring guests on to talk about those things who are experts in those areas. So I hope that you will continue to be part of the Richie and John Show fan club. And one of the ways that you can do your part in helping us grow this is to let folks know that not only are we available on all those audio podcasting services now, but you can also get the program on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel now. So if you want to watch the show, you can do that as well. And if you want to get all of it all together, all you need to do is go to our website, which is Richie, RICHIE and AND, John, JOHN.com. That's COM if you forgot. And we will look forward to seeing you again after we are through celebrating Pride in Palm Springs. And if you're coming to Pride in Palm Springs this week, be sure to shout us up. We'll be around. You'll see a lot of the Richie and John folks hanging out around town. So we look forward to seeing you, and we look forward to being back with you again starting on November the 12th. Richie, have a great week. Have a great, safe flight out to the West Coast, and I'll see you in just a matter of hours.
Yep, just a couple days. See you soon.
You bet.
Thank you for joining us on Richie and John. This podcast is a production of the Mutual Broadcasting System and is available at richieandjohn.com, as well as most major podcast portals, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify.